Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association. Find out more at nsta.org. This episode of Lab Out Loud is sponsored by askananthropologist.asu.edu. This new resource is for middle and high school teachers to engage young people in human origins and the scientific investigations, an initiative from the ASU Institute of Human Origins. You're listening to the Lab Out Loud podcast, science for the classroom and beyond. In this episode, we're talking about digital games and how they can help our students learn more.
One of my goals for these games is to give teachers another tool that they can use to reinforce the lessons that they teach in their classrooms. Not to replace their instruction, because I strongly believe as a physics teacher that your classroom is not replaceable by a screen. But I've created these games to give teachers a positive reinforcement tool after a lesson, or maybe in conjunction with a lesson, maybe a rainy day activity, or even as a homework assignment.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And today's an interesting podcast because it's another example of a science teacher making stuff on the side.
Yeah, you might remember our first episode this season that we talked to Chris Priest about. He was a graphic novelist that put together Chemistry, if you remember that. And now we have Matt Blackman, who's also making something. And again, they're science teachers making something for science education.
And I think both cases, it started off in their classroom, which we'll hear from Matt talk about, and then just a passion to grow into creating a product, actually, and something that can be useful for all science teachers. It really gets us thinking about where that is. Are there other gems like that, right?
Yeah, so if you are doing something similar to this, or you're making something, maybe it is, maybe they're videos or something, like books or other things that you're making for the science classroom. We want to think about this as like teacher created or science teacher created, organically made in the classroom, not necessarily organic, but
something we never thought of before, maybe you invented an apparatus that you've been using all the while, and you think, if I could get more of these out there, it would teach more students. I think that'd be a valuable thing to share. So let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on the show. Shoot us a message, and we'll get back to you.
For sure. But in the meantime, let's meet today's guest.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matt Blackman. I'm a high school physics teacher. I'm also a part-time lecturer at Rutgers, where I teach at the Graduate School of Education. And in my spare time, I make educational games and resources for physics classrooms.
In your spare time, huh?
Yeah, usually between the hours of 3:30 and 11:30 p.m.
How long have you been doing that?
So when I first started teaching, obviously teaching took up every spare moment of time. But then over the summer, I had the decision to basically learn coding and learn graphic design rather than get a part-time job over the summer. And over the years, I've refined that skill and been putting out, try to do at least one new game every summer.
Oh, that's exciting. Super Ultimate Graphing Challenge is the one that I was referring to when we first connected. That's the one that we've used. And that actually is something... has a little bit of history with Lab Out Loud. That's what we're linking to now because we've been hosting another applet. It's a Java applet, which was Ramp and Roll. And that's been we actually did a story about it last year. It was created, I believe, as a college project, and it's been around for like 20 years, but being Java, it's getting old. So now we have it on here like, just use Super Ultimate Graphing Challenge. Stop trying to get Ramp and Roll to work. So it's similar, but I actually like your tool better.
Yeah, Java applets are starting to show their age. It's impossible to run them now on Chromebooks, and Chromebooks are taking over. So Flash still works on Chromebooks, fortunately, but that's starting to seem like it's temporary. So I've been, the past year, learning HTML5 JavaScript development, and I'm actually planning on, as soon as the latest game Crack the Circuit is out, I'm going to start working on an HTML5 updated version for the graphing game. So hopefully that'll be out around next summer and be a little sturdier for all devices.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, that's the Java one. I mean, it'll be in about a month where I'll get all kinds of emails about Ramp and Roll because it's Java, and I'm like, your school doesn't use it anymore because no one's really using it anymore. And so there's always that chase. I remember when I first started teaching physics, there was a program on on Apple, I mean like old-timey Apple, and it was called Graphs and Tracks. And I think Ramp and Roll spun out of Graphs and Tracks as an online version of that program. And now I think your Super Ultimate Graphing Challenge is really filling the void and helping a lot of physics teachers. So I mean, just on behalf of them, I say we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent. Just a little shout out to all those iPad users out there. There's an updated version of the graphing challenge for iPad called Action Graphing, and it was originally $2.99, but I since reduced it to the nice low price of free. So if you have an iPad, look up Action Graphing, and that one is a definite improvement on the Flash version.
Fantastic.
What was the first game you made?
The very first one was the Super Ultimate Graphing Challenge. That was about 4 years ago now. Then the following year, though, I made a game about electrostatics called Polarity Shift, which is basically a version of Pong where the paddles and the ball are electrically charged.
Yeah,
nice. And the year after, I made a game, or more of a simulation actually, called The Wave Maker, which is meant to allow students a controlled environment to experiment with superposition of different waves. And most recently, I've been hard at work on Crack the Circuit, which is HTML5. So we'll work on phones, tablets, Chromebooks, desktops, laptops. And it's by far the most ambitious project, and it's based on an activity that I've done with my students involving mystery circuits and mystery boxes.
Yeah, so describe it a little bit for us. I had my son play it this morning, and I couldn't help watching as a science teacher, thinking, "Well, you're learning, ha ha ha." But can you describe it? This being an audio show, you're gonna have to do your best. But I think you know the program intimately. Describe what it is.
Yeah, I'll certainly do my best. So it's based on a lesson that I've done for years now, which requires a good deal of setup. So a couple summers back, I spent some time making these mystery circuit boxes where basically it's a closed box and you can't see what's inside, but there's light bulbs sticking out and there's light switches sticking out. So you can manipulate the light switches and see which bulbs turn on and off, and every different combination of on off for the switches gives you a different combination of on and off for the light bulbs. So
I've made some myself.
Basically
one actually came from a light fixture that we took out of our old house, and we're like, yeah, this is going to be a physics project. And it was a mystery box. Yep.
A telltale sign of a physics teacher.
Yeah.
Nothing gets thrown out. Everything is a potential future project. So yeah, I made a bunch of those, and it took a long time, but the kids loved them. I had them set up around the room, and they would go around and try to solve each of the circuits just by flipping the switches and seeing what the light bulbs did. But then I thought to myself, how many teachers out there have the time to make 6 distinct circuit mystery boxes over the summer? Probably not too many. So I decided to turn it into a game. So basically the game is each level you're presented with a different locked box where you can look at the light bulbs and flip the switches. But from doing that, you need to experiment by drawing what you think is inside the box. And if you correctly draw how the circuit is connected, you unlock the box and you advance to the next level.
Now, when will teachers be able to try it out?
So I gave it to you guys. You had the first exclusive sneak preview. Turns out the beta version is going to be released in about 2 or 3 days. So stay tuned. It's
so
right around the corner.
When this show airs, it will be officially released. So we'll have it on.
We'll have a link in our show notes for everyone to try it out.
And it's crackthecircuit.com. One word, crackthecircuit.
I have to say, out of all of them, this one seems the least lessony. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really tried to make it reminiscent of a puzzle game. So something that someone might download on their iPhone and play around with just for fun, but at the same time, it's rooted in concepts of circuitry. So they will need to at least gain some intuition, if not some knowledge about how circuits are wired and how different circuits act differently.
And what's really neat about it is I think it's really approachable. I mean, like our 4th graders are doing simple circuits, and they can certainly start with this and build a circuit, and they can essentially go as far as they wish on the app, the way it seems to be moving through the levels.
Yeah, there's no math, so it's all qualitative. It's all that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy, especially the later levels. It gets to be fairly complex with the intricate connections that you have to match. But still, it plays a lot like a game. So you can just jump right in. First circuit is pretty straightforward, lighting a light bulb, and then it progresses from there. But I'm confident that if students from an early age all the way through high school just start playing around and seeing how different connections behave and how they get the light bulbs to light up, that they'll pick up some intuition about how circuits are wired along the way.
Somewhere a long time ago, I was introduced to the concept of calling an educational game an activity, so that gives it more merit. Would you call these games or activities in that sense then?
Yeah, I'm going for a hybrid of the two, definitely. I didn't want to make it too game-like for students who aren't so good at video games and don't have the hand-eye coordination or just don't like video games. So I wanted to make it something that a teacher could use and every student in the class would be engaged and not frustrated. So I tried to incorporate some game aspects, like for example, you progress through levels and you get a prize for winning each level and so on. But there's no time limit, so you can really take your time and think about it. There's no dexterity required, so if students aren't gamers, that they can still enjoy crack the circuit. So it's somewhat of a game/simulation hybrid.
And some of your other games and activities have lesson worksheets that accompany them as well, so that you could use, right?
Yes, they all do. So one of my goals for these games is to give teachers another tool that they can use to reinforce the lessons that they teach in their classrooms. Not to replace their instruction, because I strongly believe as a physics teacher that your classroom is not replaceable by a screen, that teachers do way more than just present content, that we give the students the environment to engage with one another and we give them hands-on activities. And really, as teachers, we provide them with a high level of instruction that a game cannot replace. But I've created these games to give teachers a positive reinforcement tool after a lesson, or maybe in conjunction with a lesson, maybe a rainy day activity, or if they're absent, something that the students can do with a substitute that they're guaranteed to stay engaged with throughout the entire period, or even as a homework assignment. So this game, Crack the Circuit, works on phones. I've had teachers say that they could have students play it on the bus on the way home or on the way to school as a nice reinforcement following a lesson on circuits.
So as you just heard, Matt's been pretty busy over the past 4 years designing game after game, all while being a physics teacher during the day. Coming up after the break, we learn more about Matt's coding skills and where it all began. What factors led to our unusually large brains? When and why did we become upright walkers? Why do people cooperate? Many resources on the web provide facts about how we became human, but too few provide classroom teachers with curricular tools and content that engage young people in human origins and the scientific investigations. Inspired by askabiologist.asu.edu and the Webby Award-winning becominghuman.org, askanthropologist.asu.edu aspires to build an online community of science and social studies educators that are focused on middle and high school learners and provide teachers and their students with invaluable tools to investigate our ancient past. An initiative of the Institute of Human Origins at Arizona State University and supported by the John Templeton Foundation. Visit askanthropologist.asu.edu to learn more. And now, back to the show.
Can we talk a little bit about you going into the world of coding? We often hear about opportunities like Hour of Code, and we hear all these pushes to get coding into the classroom, and we've had parents who have also said, like, oh, my son does so many computer games that he is going to want to, build computer games in the future. And part of me is like, yeah. But, can you explain a little bit of how you got there, the transition from wanting to code and then actually coding a game?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually all started with making animations for my lessons. So I would use Adobe Flash to produce animated content and then turn those into GIFs and put those into lessons for some nice visuals. Then I started to experiment with the coding aspects of Flash using ActionScript and how it was all really nicely integrated, the graphics, the programming language, and it allowed pretty much anybody to just jump right in and start creating content. So although Flash has gotten a bad rap over the past few years, that's where it all started. And I will always have a special place in my heart for the ease that Flash provided a beginner like myself. But since then, I developed my skills through online resources. So I used a lot of video tutorial websites. I used codecademy.com. I used some online lectures and basically Googling around for every possible resource I could find.
You taught yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, well, nowadays, if you want to learn something, right, there's always free stuff out there that if you really want to learn a new skill, there's no excuse anymore.
How do your own students respond to this?
Oh, they love it. They sometimes respond with, wait a second, you made this? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
But they definitely find it interesting. They are always engaged in the lessons, especially when they know that it was designed specifically for them and for that place in the curriculum. And at the same time, I've had students who are also interested in coding who will ask me questions about, how I developed my skills and what types of languages they would need to learn in order to do similar things.
Have you had any students make something inspired by you that way?
Yes, I had a student last year who wanted to learn how to make iPad apps. So over the summer, when I would go to the public library to work on action graphing, I invited him and his brother and a couple of their friends to come by and basically have a little coding game jam sort of thing at the library. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the summer, they had created a version of the game Asteroids from scratch.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Are you getting help to do this? Maybe with the graphics or anything like that, or are you learning this every aspect of it?
So the first game, the graphing game, was all me, the graphics and the coding and everything. Since then, I've started a nonprofit. So the Universe and More is now a nonprofit company. We got a couple grants, and I've been using the grants to hire professional artists to work on the assets for our recent game. So action graphing, most of the graphics that you'll see there were made by professional game artwork designers, and Crack the Circuit as well was made by an artist in the name of Anders Larsson in Sweden.
The background music too, like Crack the Circuit's background music, I love it. It's sort of, I don't know, I feel like it's a spy kind of sound to it. And it just kind of sets the mood right away. I liked it a lot.
Going for the puzzle vibe, not too high energy because I want to give the user a little peace and quiet to think, but still with, like you said, that intrigue of the puzzle game mechanic.
What did you do when you got stuck? Were there any major pitfalls? Like, you try to get this on the Apple Store or anything like that? Were there any major roadblocks where you weren't sure if you were going to make it?
Every step of the way, yeah. A lot of late nights, a lot of bugs that just scratch my head for hours until finally figuring out
there's that feeling that is like,
my understanding of coding was somehow flawed. Just really a lot of hours spent. Let's just put it that way.
I've been tinkering around with some woodworking, and I'm just barely scratching the surface. And everything I do, it's like I feel like there's an expert looking over me somewhere would know exactly what the problem is, and I'm wasting so much time being ignorant here, but I just don't know. And that's such an unsettling feeling of like I can't find the person to help me.
Yeah, my advice that I give to any student who asks me what most important skill to learn if you want to be a game developer or just a programmer in general, and I always tell them it's knowing what to Google to find the answer to your question. Totally. Because a lot of these things, it's not readily clear what the problem even is. Like something will look like it's not working, and it turns out the problem is 3 levels deeper somewhere that you didn't originally think. So I've really spent the last couple of years Googling all the problems that I've had and finding the answers that way.
Do you have other teachers come to you with app ideas like, hey, I always wanted this to happen. Can you make that?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. And there's a lot of lessons out there that teachers love and they swear by and they can see the benefits, but that really just require either a lot of prep work or some expensive equipment. So it's one of my goals to take those lessons that might be prohibitively expensive or just require too much setup by teachers and turning them into online games and apps so that their students can still get the benefits of the lesson.
Okay. So what do you have in mind for the future? Do you have anything you're working on, or what's next year's project?
Tons of ideas. So I have 6 games in concept development right now with different lessons that have inspired them. The next one, though, that's going to come after Crack the Circuit is going to be all about wave superposition. So I have a game where my students will stretch a slinky lengthwise down the hallway, lay it on the floor, and one student holds each end of the slinky, and they can create waves in the slinky that will interact with each other when they meet. And I put cups along either side of the slinky, either green or red cups, and it's their job to use the superposition of their two waves to knock over the green cups and avoid the red cups. And I've had good success with it as a class activity, but I thought, how cool would it be if the students could either follow this up or just replace this in-class game with a more scaffolded version online where they could manipulate the ends of a string or a slinky and use that to hit certain targets and avoid others when the waves constructively interfere and destructively interfere.
Have you thought about anything for lenses?
Yeah, so I've been experimenting with optics in a game format for a while now. I think there's a lot of games already out there where it's not explicitly intended to teach physics, but the students still need to use intuitive ideas of reflection and refraction to hit targets, for example, and complete objective. So I was toying with those ideas and putting them in a context where it's a little more geared towards the academic aspects of light.
One of our previous guests, we talked about was working at, made a graphic novel, chemistry teacher, and then used comics and created a graphic novel. And he had the artwork done, I guess, on a freelance website. Kind of put out the call looking for an artist. We almost need like a freelance or a website where teachers can submit like ideas, like I wish this was an app, or I wish this was a game, and then programmers, designers, and things like that could go in there and say, all right, well, this has potential. Wouldn't that be kind of neat?
Is there like science teachers pay science teachers out there?
I'm thinking of like I don't have the time to code this myself, or maybe it doesn't interest me in learning that. But I'd
love to see this.
Yeah, I'd love to see this happen, that kind of thing, and then sort of a coder versus science teacher love connection website.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think there's a lot of teachers out there who are really passionate about particular lessons that they do with their students and definitely want to share them with the larger teaching community. The beautiful thing about these advances in programming languages and in support that's out there on the online community is what I'm doing now would have been impossible to do even 15 years ago, where I have no formal training in programming. I'm trained as a first physics and then physics education, but just by nature of how accessible this stuff is becoming, I was able to learn online how to do it. And I could foresee in the future, maybe even the teacher dictates to a computer what the app should look like, and the computer does all the coding automatically for them. That's starting to look less and less like science fiction every year. So I'm excited to see where the accessibility goes.
And instead of like the auto tuner for music, we have the auto coder for put in what you want and get out the app that you need.
You say, can you move that button a little to the left and turn all of that text green, and the computer will just know how to translate that to lines of code.
Sorry, Matt, this button is too important to me. Well, before we let you go, Matt, what about teachers that are listening and they're like, I have an idea, I want to build a project. What do you have any encouragement for them for making that first step?
Yeah, well, first of all, let's talk on Twitter. So I love Twitter. I think it's, for whatever reason, become a huge hub for science educators in general. And so I'm always talking with teachers on there about best practices and how to improve my games, and we talk about how to incorporate them into lessons. But in general, if you have an idea and you want to turn it into something on the digital world, then it's very possible. It's not as inaccessible as you may think. Just with maybe a dozen or 2 hours, you can get started with a small project and work your way up from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Matt, and thank you for all the work that you've created, and good luck to your next school year.
Thank you very much.
For links and other information related to this episode, visit laboutloud.com. You can send us your questions and comments at laboutloud.com/contact.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.